In this video, I'm going to show you how to fix some different types of drywall damage. From minor damage like we have right here, where I pushed a drywall anchor through, to something about hammer size, to something about the size of a fist, and to major damage like we have right here. This is Rudy from the Home Improvement channel with another video showing you how to fix things around the house. If you're a subscribed member to my community, then welcome back. If you're new to this channel, consider clicking that subscribe button below, and please like this video if you found it helpful for you. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive right in. Alright, so this first type that we've got here is obviously the easiest one to fix. Now this one was just a regular drywall anchor, and as you saw in the video at the beginning, I just took a hammer and drove it straight through. Now if you have this kind that's got the thread on it, I don't recommend driving that through because it'll just make a bigger hole. It actually will unthread. Alright. Now if you notice right here, around the edge of this hole, a little bit of a ridge right there. So what I like to do is take the back of the screwdriver and just kind of bang down that ridge so that it's not sticking up. And that goes for any hole that you're patching. So this one doesn't really require any tape or anything special. You can just cover this one. I recommend you probably put on a couple coats, give it time to dry, keeping everything as thin as possible around the edges. Okay, so we have here a little bit bigger of a hole. Now this one here, you can't just fill up with mud. It's a little bit too big for that. So I recommend this type of patch right here. These come in different sizes. This one is a 4x4. I think they come in maybe 8x8 is about as big as you can get, and they're real nice. They have a metal grill or grate or whatever you want to call it in there to give it a little bit of strength to deal with this hole. Now if you notice this side of the wall here, you may not be able to see it on the camera, it's got the orange peel finish. I'll show you more about this in a few minutes here, but the other side of the wall I did as a smooth finish, just to kind of give you a contrast of the two different types of finishes here. Alright, so let's go ahead and apply this patch. Just kind of peel the backing off of the back of it there, and it's got a little bit of a sticky back to it, so it should stay on here pretty good. And as before, get any kind of high spots down. This one's not too bad. And just stick it on there, just like so. Making sure it's down. Just kind of push that like that. It is sticking up a little bit because of the age, and it's got a wrinkle in it from sitting in my toolbox for years, or however long I've had that. So I'll come back to that in a few minutes. Okay, so this next kind here is a little bit bigger. Now this one's not so big that you couldn't use one of those grate patches like I was just telling you about, but I'm going to show you a different kind of patch that I like to use too. And now if this was even a bigger hole, this would still work. For what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use a California patch. Now what that involves is cutting this out as a square and then measuring that square, okay? And then whatever that square is, add about 2 inches on each side of it so that it's bigger than the hole is. There's also something called a Presto patch that is very similar to a California patch, but they're fairly expensive, and I checked my local Lowe's here and they don't even have them in stock. So the Presto patch is basically the same as the California patch, but you can make your own patch, very simple. Now what I like to do is keep my hole fairly level. The reason is when you go to cut out your square patch, you can cut it out fairly consistent, where it's 4x4 or 5x5 or whatever, and it's not a triangle because everything's crooked. So I like to level the lines. Now all you need is a little saw like this, a little keyhole saw. These work great. If you have an oscillating tool like this one, that works even better. That's what I usually use. But I'm using this type of saw because it's cheap, and if you don't have the other type of saw available to you, and of course you're not going to want to go buy one just to patch one hole, this is a great alternative. So just basically just take this saw and press it into the hole. Now when you're doing this, make sure not to go like this, okay? Because you might have plumbing or wiring or something behind the wall there that you really don't want to damage, especially, well, either one, plumbing or wiring, either one is a catastrophe. So be careful and take shallow little saw strokes like so, and you'll be in good shape. Kind of clean that up a little bit right there. Some of this mess out of here. All right, so that's good. Pretty straight looking. So just measure that. Okay, so here's our patch. This inside square area right here is the actual patch that's going to wind up going into the drywall. And this extra area here all the way around is my 1 inch of flap or whatever you want to call it. You could leave a little more than 1 inch. You could leave 1.5 inches if you wanted to. But 1 inch I've found is pretty sufficient. And by the way, this is about as big as you would want to get without putting any kind of a wood backer. You can make a patch like this just about as big as you want it, but you're going to have to put a wood backer behind it, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in just a minute. But let's cut this thing out real quick. So stay on this outside edge. This is the edge we're actually going to break off of the bigger piece here. Just like so. And when you get the piece out that you want, go ahead and cut all the way around like that on your line, and then break these all the way around. Now all you have to do is peel this off of here like that. Just like so. There we go. Now we have a nice flap to go all the way around. So now, what I would recommend, of course, is adding mud. I would go ahead and add some mud all the way around here. Like so. You could even add some mud inside like that, if you wanted to give it some extra holding power. And if you wanted to, you could butter the back of this to give it a little extra mud and press that puppy in there and just flatten it out. Always keeping your edges real thin. So ideally, for damage this bad, you would want to cut your hole from stud to stud. I prefer to cut to the center of the stud to the center of the next stud is the best way to do it. Just take your stud finder and find the studs, right? But in this case, my drywall that I have left right here is not big enough, so I'm going to cut out in between the studs, which is fine. Even if the hole were a little bit smaller than this, the same method that I'm going to use here is perfect. So again, I'm going to use this saw right here. And again, make sure, but to be careful, if you've got a hole here, you can kind of peek in the wall and make sure there's no wires right there that you're getting ready to cut into, or plumbing or something important like that. Another thing is you're going to want to make sure to cut back to good drywall, because if you cut back just a little bit past your damage, the backside could be damaged and you can't see it. Now what I need to do is put something behind this so that my new drywall has something to, hold it in there. So I'm going to take some wood backing strips and put them back here, okay? Now, you could use plywood is ideal. Plywood won't crack very easy. You could use a piece of trim or a 1x4 or even a 2x4 for that matter. Whatever you can put back here that's substantial enough to hold is going to work. All right, I got my strips made. So all these things do is you just put them in here like this and kind of split 50-50 on the distance, you know, so that you've got a good amount of wood on both sides. And I'm going to take these and go all the way around, okay? Even if I was going from stud to stud, of course I wouldn't need these on the sides, but I would still use these shorter ones in between on this wide of a span right here. Okay, got my wood in all the way around. Now I got something real nice for my piece to stick to. Just go ahead and put that puppy in there, and if it'll fit. There we go. Beautiful. Now we got something real solid there all the way around. All right, so for a repair like this one, I like to use this mesh tape right here. It works really well. It does have a sticky back to it, so that helps it hold itself on there until you get the mud on it. So just carefully apply that between the seams right there. And you can cut that with your drywall knife. Now when you're using this tape, I have used regular joint compound in the past, but I recently came to find out that the instructions for this tape actually say for you to use the mixed up stuff like the 45 or the 30 that comes in a powder that you mix up by hand on the first coat. Now after you get that first coat established, you can use the regular joint compound. All right, so I've got my compound mixed up. I'm using the 30 here. I'm not going to show that part because it's just self-explanatory. Now for the first coat, you can use a 6-inch knife, but later after the first coat, I recommend using a much wider knife to flare this out some more. But we just need to get that first coat established here. Making sure to keep your edges of your mud thin because you don't want to be sanding this for a month. Okay, so normally between coats, I don't really sand very much. I just kind of take my knife and scrape around, you know, like so, to get any of the high spots off of there. Now for the second and third coats, I usually use this 12-inch knife like this, and this works fine. So that way I can kind of spread this out much wider than it is. Now, of course, I've got my other coating sprayed on the other side there, so I'm trying not to contaminate that. But normally on a joint like that, you could make it this wide, and that'll blend it in much better. I'll do that up here so you can see what I mean. I normally like to press on the outside edge just to kind of float that edge much smoother on the end, on the edge. That way you're not sanding so much. It takes a little bit of practice. That's about it. Definitely going to need another coat, if not another coat. But I'm going to go ahead and add those other coats without the camera. That way I don't bore you to death, but it's just the same thing I just did. Okay, got all my coats of mud on there that I want to get on there. Sanding is pretty straightforward. One thing is you don't want to over sand. So remember in this area I had that yellow tape. So you don't want to sand too deep and expose the yellow tape. So kind of be careful with that. You want to sand the edges down until there's just like they fade down to nothing. Over here on the side with the orange peel, it's a little more difficult. I like to take a light and kind of shine across there like that. Hopefully that's showing up on the camera. Then you can really see the imperfections, right? So just kind of sand these down. You don't have to use the light. I just like to use the light because it really shows everything real nice. That actually turned out pretty good, but if you have a stubborn area, you could take a wet paintbrush and kind of just dab around here, and that will cut that down even farther. Don't make it sopping wet. Okay, just kind of brush like that, and that will calm that down even more. All right, the light really helps with that. And on the other side, it's really just the same principles. Shine your light across there if you have one, and if you can feel a bump like that, you probably can't see that on the camera. If you can feel it, you can see it. So just sand these down until they go into nothing. And that's really all there is to sanding. One of the tricks is to not put it on real thick to begin with. Okay, the thinner you put it on, the thinner you keep your edges, the easier time you're going to have when it comes time to sand this down. Now this side is ready to paint over here. I would primer this first. I don't like to paint raw drywall mud. I always like to primer it first with a Kills or a Zinsser or something like that. But this other side, we've got it looking pretty smooth, but we have a orange peel texture on here. So let me show you what I would do with that. Okay, so for the orange peel texture, I would actually prefer to use this kind of a gun. They're only about $35 from Amazon, and you can reuse it, of course. And for 50 cents worth of mud, I can fix this whole problem. But if you don't have an air compressor, or if you don't want to go through all the trouble to buy this just to make 1 or 2 patches, I can certainly understand that. So the next alternative is this thing, which is a spray-on wall texture that you can get from your Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. But this is expensive. One can is like 20 bucks. But this is the pro-grade stuff, and it will work just, for a small job like this. If you don't have anything else in the future, I can understand it. You'll have to play with your settings to get the consistency about the same as what you have on the wall. My best recommendation is to spray onto a piece of cardboard or a test area that you don't care about. Right here we got some cardboard. So go ahead and do that first, and then see where you want to set it at, and you can adjust with these settings that are right here on the can. All right, I got the paint on this thing, and it turned out pretty good. You can't really tell where my patch was. And I did use 2 different guns on this. I used the hopper first, and then the can after. So it did match perfectly, and it was dry within about 10 minutes, to my surprise. I was happy about that. Turned out perfect. And then, of course, the other side is smooth. It's no problem. No problem at all. All right, guys, I hope this video has been helpful for you. Thanks for watching.